On their 7th wedding anniversary, Kwang Che came home early, wanting to surprise Pei Yulu. Instead, he walked in on his wife and her lover, Xiao Lin, kissing in the living room, while his 5-year-old son excitedly called Xiao Lin daddy. The night the paternity test results came back, Kwang Che laughed as he burned the report to ashes. Kwang Che tossed his car keys into the glass bowl in the entryway, making a crisp ding. He loosened the tie that felt a bit too tight, the corners of his mouth turning up involuntarily. 7 years. He had been married to Pei Yulu for a full 7 years. They all talked about the 7-year itch, but he felt that their life was like one of the well-oiled, precise instruments at his company. Stable, reliable, even a bit dull. But today was different. He had specifically canceled a dispensable social engagement for the evening and taken a detour to that ridiculously expensive French patisserie on the west side of town. He'd waited in line for half an hour to buy the Black Forest cherry mousse that Pei Yulu had mentioned several times. He carried the small, exquisite cake box carefully in his hand like a secret weapon. He wanted to give her a surprise. An anniversary, after all, called for a bit of ceremony, even though Pei Yulu had complained a few days ago that he wasn't romantic. Daddy's home. His son Ranran's childish, cheerful voice shot out from the living room like a small cannonball, filled with undisguised excitement. The smile on Kwang Che's face deepened. He bent down, ready to catch the small, soft body as it leaped into his arms. However, in the next second, the smile on his face froze as if flash frozen, instantly solidifying, stiffening, and then shattering piece by piece. In the living room, the bright ceiling light cast a warm yellow glow. Ranran was indeed running towards the door, but the target he was rushing towards was not Kwang Che. A few steps in front of Ranran stood 2 people. His wife, Pei Yulu. She was wearing the lotus root pink silk nightgown he had bought her last year, which complemented her skin tone perfectly. Her long hair was slightly disheveled, and her cheeks were flushed with an unnatural crimson. And another man, a stranger Kwang Che had never seen before. He was tall, dressed in a well-tailored casual suit with a strong jawline. At that moment, the man's hand was still resting loosely on Pei Yulu's slender waist. And Ranran, his 5-year-old precious son, was running with his arms outstretched like a happy little bird, diving straight into the strange man's arms, shouting loudly and clearly, "Daddy! Daddy, hold me!" "Daddy?" A buzz went off in Kwang Che's head, as if he had been struck violently by a heavy hammer. All sound, Ranran's laughter, the noise from the cartoons on TV, even his own breathing, was sucked away in that instant, leaving only a sharp, suffocating ringing in his ears. He saw the strange man bend down with extreme naturalness, scoop Ranran up, and even affectionately rub his nose against the little one's cheek, smiling as he said, "Good boy. Did you miss Daddy?" Pei Yulu also turned around. The blush had not yet faded from her face, along with a trace of panic, but it was quickly covered by a deliberate, slightly chiding smile. "Honey? Why are you back so early?" Her gaze swept over the cake box in his hand, her eyes flickering for a moment. "Didn't you say you had an engagement?" The man holding Ranran also looked over. There wasn't a shred of surprise or panic in his eyes. Instead, they held a scrutinizing, even faintly provocative glint. He was holding Kwang Che's son, standing in Kwang Che's house, wearing slippers paid for by Kwang Che, facing Kwang Che, with the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Oh, you must be Mr. Kwang." The man spoke, his voice deep and imbued with the ease of someone in control of the situation. "I've heard so much about you. Yulu often mentions you. I'm Xiao Lin." He freed one hand, seemingly intending to extend it for a handshake, his posture as casual as if he were welcoming a guest in his own territory. In Xiao Lin's arms, Ranran turned his head. His big eyes looked at Kwang Che, who stood frozen in the entryway, his face ashen. The boy's face was full of innocent confusion. "Daddy!" He looked at Xiao Lin, then at Kwang Che, seemingly unable to understand why there were 2 daddies. "Daddy!" Ranran called out to Kwang Che again, his voice tinged with uncertainty. That single word, "Daddy," was like a red-hot branding, iron-searing Kwang Che's heart. His fingers, clutching the cake box, tightened abruptly. The knuckles turned a bluish-white from the excessive force. The hard edge of the cardboard box dug deep into his palm, sending a sharp, stinging pain, but was not even a 10,000th of the agony in his chest. He stared intently at the arms of Xiao Lin holding Ran, at the feigned composure on Pei Yulu's face that couldn't hide her guilt, and at the undisguised, victorious arrogance in the eyes of this man named Xiao Lin. The air froze, thick with a cloying, sickeningly sweet stench, a mixture of the cake's richness and some unseen filth. A laugh, faint and cold, was forced from the depths of Quang Che's throat. The sound was as dry as sandpaper, trembling on the verge of a violent explosion. Slowly, step by step, he walked into the living room. His expensive, handmade Italian leather shoes made heavy, distinct clacks on the polished floor. Each step seemed to land on Pei Yulu's suddenly racing heart. Pei Yulu subconsciously took half a step back, her body tensing slightly. "Honey, let me explain." Quang Che didn't look at her. His gaze was like a poisoned icicle, nailed firmly to Xiao Lin's face. He stopped a single step away from Xiao Lin. They were of similar height, and their gazes clashed violently in the air, a silent, murderous battle. The smile on Xiao Lin's face faded slightly, but his composure remained, even tinged with a hint of amusement. He held Ran as if holding the most powerful shield. "Explain." Quang Che finally spoke, his voice terrifyingly low. Each word seemed to have been dredged from cellar of ice, carrying a bone-chilling cold. "Explain what? Explain why my son is calling some other man daddy. Explain why my wife, in her pajamas on the night of our 7th wedding anniversary, is in my living room, getting intimate with another man." He bit out the last 2 words with a bloody, tearing force. The color drained from Pei Yulu's face instantly. Her lips trembled. "No, Quang Che, you misunderstood. Xiao Lin, he's just Ran's." "Shut up." Quang Che suddenly roared, a snarl like that of a wounded beast, instantly cutting off Pei Yulu's pale, feeble defense. The enormous crystal chandelier in the living room seemed to tremble slightly at his roar. Startled by the sudden shout, Ran flinched. His little mouth crumpled, and he burst out crying with a wah, desperately burrowing into Xiao Lin's arms for protection. Xiao Lin immediately patted Ran's back gently, his eyes turning to Quang Che with reproach. "Mr. Quang, you're scaring the child. Whatever it is, we adults can talk it over. Why must you?" The child, Quang Che reacted as if he'd heard the world's most absurd joke. He threw up a hand, pointing at the sobbing Ran in Xiao Lin's arms, his fingertip trembling violently with extreme rage. "My child? This one you're holding, the one who calls you daddy, is my child." His gaze slowly shifted to Pei Yulu, his eyes churning with a towering inferno of rage, the searing pain of utter betrayal, and a madness bordering on annihilation. "Pei Yulu," he called her full name, his voice hoarse, every word laced with blood and tears. "Tell me, whose bastard is Ran?" Stung by the terrifying light in his eyes, Pei Yulu shuddered all over. She instinctively avoided his gaze, her lips parting and closing, yet unable to utter a single word. An immense fear seized her, making it nearly impossible to breathe. Xiao Lin's brows furrowed tightly. He took a step forward, shielding both Pei Yulu and Ran behind him, his tone turning cold and hard. "Quang Che, calm down. Of course Ran is... Did I ask you?" Quang Che whipped his head around, his bloodshot eyes locked on Xiao Lin. The ferocity in his gaze made even the seasoned businessman's heart lurch. "This is my house. I'm asking my wife. Is it your place, some other man, to butt in?" He violently slammed the delicate cake box he had been carrying onto the floor. Crash! The expensive black forest cherry mousse was instantly smashed to ruin. Dark sponge cake, bright red cherry compote, and snow-white cream mixed with shards of the container, exploding across the polished floor in a chaotic, sticky mess. Like their marriage, now utterly shattered and filthy. The loud noise startled Ran so much that his cries caught in his throat, leaving only terrified sobs. Pei Yulu stared at the glaring mess on the floor. The anniversary cake Quang Che had specially bought for her. Her face was ashen, her body swaying as if it might collapse. Quang Che didn't spare the cake on the floor a single glance. His chest heaved violently, like a cornered beast pushed past its limit. He stared intently at the scene before him. This happy family of three, before he arrived, watching the man named Xiao Lin protect his wife and child. As if it were his right, watching Pei Yulu's guilty and fearful expression, watching Ranran's complete reliance on Xiao Lin. A metallic tang of blood suddenly surged up his throat. He spun around abruptly, strode to the entryway, and snatched the car keys from the shoe cabinet. The cold touch of the metal bit into his palm, bringing a brief, almost masochistic moment of clarity. Quang Che, where are you going? Pei Yulu's sobbing voice, filled with desperate panic, sounded from behind him. Quang Che's steps halted at the door, but he did not turn back. His back was to the mess and to the three people he hated to the bone at this moment, his shoulders as tense as a slab of hard rock. Go get a paternity test. His voice was icy and flat, without any inflection, yet it was like a dagger dipped in deadly poison, stabbing fiercely into Pei Yulu's heart. Before I get the results, the three of you had better stay right here. Don't go anywhere. As the last word fell, he yanked open the heavy, solid wood door and plunged into the thick darkness outside without a backward glance. Bang! The door was slammed shut with a deafening crash, and the entire house seemed to tremble with it. In the living room, a dead silence fell. Only Ranran suppressed, intermittent sobs remained. Pei Yulu's legs gave way, and she could no longer support herself, collapsing onto the cold floor. Not far from her lay the cloyingly sweet and disgusting remains of the cake. She stared at the closed door, an immense fear washing over her like an icy tide, completely submerging her in an instant. It was over. Everything was over. Xiao Lin, holding the still sobbing Ranran, wore a frighteningly grim expression. He looked in the direction Quang Che had disappeared, his gaze complicated, a mix of anger, apprehension, but mostly the frustration of things spiraling out of his control. He looked down at the terrified child in his arms, then at the devastated Pei Yulu, his brows knitted tightly into a knot. The night was thick and impenetrable, completely swallowing this cage that was once called home. The roar of an engine tore through the usual tranquility of the Villa District. Quang Che floored the accelerator, and the black SUV became a rampaging steel beast, speeding wildly through the empty, midnight streets. The car windows were wide open, and the biting night wind rushed in like knives, lashing at his burning face, yet did nothing to cool the boiling lava in his veins. The glaring scene from the living room flashed before his eyes again and again. Pei Yulu's flushed face, Xiao Lin's provocative gaze, the clear cry of daddy when Ranran rushed into Xiao Lin's arms, and the smashed, filthy cake on the floor, symbolizing the complete end of their 7-year marriage. My child? Whose child is Ranran, really? The immense panic and guilt that flashed across Pei Yulu's eyes the moment he asked that question was seared onto his retinas like a brand. No answer was needed. That reaction was more direct, more brutal than any words could be. Fuck. Quang Che slammed his fist onto the steering wheel. The horn blared a long, piercing sound, seeming particularly shrill in the silent night. The sharp pain from his knuckles brought a brief moment of clarity to his chaotic and furious mind. A paternity test. It had to be done. Right now, immediately. He wrenched the steering wheel. The car screeched into a sharp turn, tires screaming against the pavement, and sped away in the opposite direction from home, towards the private hospital downtown known for its efficiency and privacy. At 1:30 in the morning, the lights in the hospital's VIP corridor were a ghastly, cold white. The nurse on duty was terrified by Quang Che's hellish expression and bloodshot eyes, and she tremblingly processed the expedited request for him. Sir, the fastest result for an expedited hair sample test will take 24 hours. The nurse explained the procedure in a low voice, handing over 2 sterile collection bags. Quang Che snatched the bags with a rough movement. He walked to an empty waiting area nearby, turned his back to the nurse, and violently ripped several strands of hair with follicles attached from his own head, stuffing them into one bag. Then he stared at the other empty bag, his eyes terrifyingly sinister. He needed Ranran's sample. Now, he took out his phone, the screen's light illuminating his bloodless face. His fingers stiffly swiped, opening the home surveillance app. He had installed it to be able to see his home, to see Ranran, whenever he was away on business trips. How ironic. His fingertip hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. He could almost imagine what he would see after tapping on a live feed. What would Pei Yulu and Xiao Lin be doing in the home he had just left? Consoling each other? Plotting? Or an even more unbearable scene? A strong wave of nausea rose in his throat. He squeezed his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, only cold determination remained. He had to get the sample, the sooner the better. That was the hard evidence that could either free him from this hell of uncertainty or cast him completely into the abyss. He took a deep breath and, with a cruelty that was almost self-inflicted, tapped on the live feed of the living room. The screen lit up and the image loaded. The living room was a wreck, the smashed cake still on the floor like an ugly scar. Pei Yulu was curled up in a corner of the sofa, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. She was clearly weeping bitterly. Xiao Linza paced restlessly in the living room, his face dark as he cradled Ran, who had cried himself to sleep and was now drowsy. His lips moved ceaselessly, as if muttering curses under his breath. There was no more compromising scene, but the sight of this family of three together, as if after surviving a catastrophe, was still like a poison-laced needle stabbing fiercely into Kwang Che's eyes. His gaze locked onto the small figure in Xiao Lin's arms. Ran. His son? No, perhaps he never was. Bit by bit, Kwang Che's eyes became as cold and precise as a scalpel. He captured a clear close-up of Ran's head from the surveillance footage, focusing specifically on the few wisps of soft, fine hair that curled up near the nape of his neck. Then, he exited the surveillance app and dialed a number that had been in his phone for a long time, but had never been called. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. A man's voice, drowsy but exceptionally alert, came through. "Hello. It's me, Kwang Che." Kwang Che's voice was low and hoarse, devoid of any pleasantries. "I have a job. Now, I'll send you the location. Target, my son, Kwang Ran. Get at least 3 strands of hair with follicles from the back of his neck. Be quick, be clean. Don't alert anyone, especially the man and woman with him." The person on the other end of the line was silent for 2 seconds, clearly processing the sudden and bizarre request. Then, the man's voice became clear and professional. "Understood, Mr. Kwang. Mission will be accomplished. I'll be there in half an hour. Double the pay," Kwang Che said before hanging up directly. He leaned against the cold hospital wall, tilted his head back, and closed his eyes. The strong, pungent smell of hospital disinfectant strangely brought a numb sort of calm to his chaotic mind. Every second of waiting felt as long as a century. He was like a lifeless stone statue. Only his tightly clenched fists and the slight rise and fall of his chest proved he was still alive. 25 minutes later, his phone screen silently lit up. An encrypted message popped up. "Done. Sample has been placed in the gap of the inner fender of your car's front left wheel. Secure." Kwang Che's eyes flew open, bloodshot. Without a moment's hesitation, he strode out of the hospital and back to the parking lot. Crouching down, his fingers fumbled in the cold crevice inside the wheel well, and he soon touched a tiny object sealed in a transparent evidence bag, a few soft strands of a 5-year-old boy's hair. He pinched the small evidence bag, his fingertips icy. Inside, it was the final evidence that would pass judgment on 7 years of his life. Back at the hospital's lab, he slapped 2 sample bags, one containing the hair of the father, Kwang Che, and the other, the hair of the son, Kwang Ran, heavily onto the cold counter. "Rush order. 24 hours. I want the most accurate result." His voice was devoid of emotion, yet carried an unquestionable, heart-stopping force. The doctor on duty, intimidated by the intense hostility radiating from him, didn't dare ask any questions. He quickly took the samples and entered them into the system. "Notify me the moment the results are out," Kwang Che said, then turned and once again melted into the thick darkness of the night. He did not go home. That place, to him right now, was more nauseating than hell. He drove aimlessly through the city's empty streets, like a homeless, wandering ghost. The neon lights outside the car window were brilliant and colorful, but they couldn't cast a single ray of light into the depths of his heart. His phone screen lit up occasionally with calls from Pei Yulu, one after another, frantic and persistent. He didn't even look, simply rejecting them, and finally, just turned off his phone. The world was finally, completely quiet, leaving only the monotonous roar of the engine and his own heartbeat, as heavy as a war drum. Betrayal. Deception. A complete and utter 7-year-long farce. He remembered Pei Yulu snuggling in his arms, whispering gently, "Hubby, Ran looks so much like you." He remembered being so excited he couldn't sleep the entire night when Ran first called him Dada in a muddled voice. He remembered how he fought like a mad dog in the business world, enduring business dinners until he coughed up blood, all to give this mother and son a better life. Ha, ha, ha. A low, twisted laugh echoed in the enclosed car, filled with endless desolation and madness. So the family he had fought for, given his all for, and the son he had treasured like a jewel, had been a meticulously designed scam from the very beginning. He, Kwang Che, was the world's #1 fool, a cuckold who was played like a fiddle by his wife and her lover, happily raising another man's bastard for 5 years. A torrent of molten fury surged and crashed within his chest, threatening to burn him to ashes. But beneath this destructive rage, something colder, harder, was rapidly solidifying. It was hatred. A hatred that sank deep into the bones, a hatred that would not rest until death. Pei Yulu Shaolin. And that little bastard who called him Dad. He violently turned the steering wheel, and the car sped toward the remote riverbank on the edge of the city. Stopping the car, he pushed open the door and stumbled to the edge of the cold river. The night wind howled, making his thin shirt whip about. He needed to calm down. He needed to think. Anger makes one lose reason, and revenge without reason is low class. It is foolish. What he wanted was not a moment's satisfaction. He wanted them to pay the price. The most painful, most absolute, most desperate price. He wanted to personally push them into the hell he was currently experiencing. No, into an abyss darker and more irredeemable than this. Kwang Che stood on the pitch-black riverbank like a cold statue of vengeance. He pulled out a cigarette case, took one out, and lit it. The crimson spark flickered in the dense night, illuminating his expressionless profile and his eyes, which glinted with madness and calculation in the darkness. The light of the cigarette, like a fuse to hell, burned silently on the quiet riverbank. 24 hours. For a full 24 hours, Kwang Che had not closed his eyes. He had locked himself in a little-known luxury apartment in the city center, a safe house he had bought years ago as an asset, its existence unknown even to Pei Yulu. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out all light from outside. The room was filled with a thick smell of smoke and a deathly, oppressive silence. He paced back and forth in the dark living room like a wounded, trapped beast, the expensive carpet under his feet trampled into a mess. The ashtray was already piled high, with a small mountain of cigarette butts. His phone lay on the coffee table in front of him, its screen dark, like a silent tombstone awaiting a verdict from hell. Time ticked by second, each one like a dull knife slicing through flesh. The lava of his anger cooled, and what settled was a cold hatred sufficient to freeze the soul. He replayed the glaring scene in the living room over and over. Pei Yulu's panic, Shaolin's arrogance, Ran's clear cry of Dad. Every detail was like a poisoned needle, repeatedly stabbing his already riddled heart. Ding! An extremely faint notification sound, yet one that rang out like a clap of thunder in the dead silence, suddenly echoed. Kwang Che's steps froze in place. He practically threw himself at the coffee table and snatched up the phone. The screen lit up with an encrypted message notification from the private hospital. Mr. Kwang, the expedited paternity test report you requested. Sample no. JQ202-30923 has been generated. The electronic version has been sent to your designated email address. The physical copy can be collected at any time with identification. It's here. His heart pounded wildly in his chest, almost about to burst through his ribs. Blood rushed to his head, only to freeze into ice the next second. His fingers were so stiff they barely obeyed him as he trembled and opened his email. The email, bearing the hospital's logo, lay quietly at the very top of his inbox. The subject line contained only a few cold words: frowny face DNA paternity test report. He stared at that line of text for a full 10 seconds. Then, with a decisiveness that was almost self-torturing, he opened the email attachment. The PDF file loaded. He skipped past all the long sections of professional terminology, testing methods, and sample information, his gaze like a precision probe, stabbing directly towards the conclusion at the very bottom of the report, the line that would decide his fate. Frowny face based on the DNA genetic marker analysis results. It is not supported that Specimen 1, Quang Che, is the biological father of Specimen 2, Quang Ran. Not supported. Biological father. 8 words. Like 8 meteorites falling from 10,000 meters, they crashed onto Quang Che's retinas with the force to destroy everything, smashing deep into his soul. The world at that moment completely lost its sound, its color. He remained motionless, frozen in the posture of bending over and staring at his phone screen. Time seemed to have solidified. Only the light from the phone screen faintly illuminated his ghostly pale face and his eyes, which had instantly lost all focus, leaving only a boundless void and dead silence. A very light, very faint laugh escaped from his throat. The laugh was terrifyingly hollow, devoid of any emotion, as if it came from a soulless shell. Then, the laughter grew louder, more distorted, more insane. Ha ha! Ha 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 ha! He abruptly straightened up and threw his head back, laughing wildly at the sky. The laughter echoed in the empty, silent apartment, crashing against the cold walls and bouncing back, carrying a horrifying shrillness and despair. He laughed until his whole body trembled, laughed until tears streamed down his face, laughed until he bent over, almost unable to breathe. Not supported. Biological father. Ha ha! Good, good. What a not supported, what a biological father. 5 years, 5 whole years. He had poured out all his love, given all his heart and soul, holding a bastard in the palm of his hand, treating him like a precious treasure. He, Quang Che, a man who was a force to be reckoned with in the business world, had been played for a fool by a woman and a bastard for 5 years, wearing a green hat for 5 years, being a living cuckold for 5 years. The wild laughter gradually subsided, leaving only heavy, ragged breathing. He raised a hand and fiercely wiped away the tears of laughter from the corners of his eyes, the motion carrying a brutish ferocity. When he looked up again, the expression on his face had completely changed. All the pain, despair, and madness were replaced by an ultimate iciness. His eyes, bottomless and dark, were like 2 cold pools that devoured everything, churning with the purest, most distilled hatred. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant, Lin Wei. His voice was so calm it was chilling, carrying an unnerving tone of command. Lin Wei, execute plan A immediately. First, freeze all of Pei Yulu's personal bank accounts, credit cards, and electronic payment channels, including the cards she secretly opened using her mother's ID. Immediately right now. Not a single cent is to be moved. Second, contact lawyer Zhang at Apex Law Firm. Initiate divorce proceedings. Sue Pei Yulu, as the party at major fault in the marriage, demand that she leaves with nothing and recover all child support, education, and medical expenses I have paid for Quang Ran over the past 5 years, down to the last cent. Third, notify property management and security. Without my permission, Pei Yulu and anyone not designated by me are forbidden from approaching any of my properties or vehicles. Fourth, investigate a man named Shaolin. I want all his information, his family, career, social connections. The more detailed, the better. Send it to me before dawn. Lin Wei, on the other end of the line, was clearly stunned by this series of ruthlessly cold commands. She fell silent for 2 seconds before responding swiftly. Understood, Mr. Quang. Executing immediately. After hanging up, Quang Che walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window of the apartment and yanked open the heavy curtains. Blinding sunlight flooded in, enveloping him. He squinted slightly, adjusting to the sudden brightness. Outside the window was the bustling traffic and teeming crowds of the prosperous city. He looked down again at the cold, digital report on his phone screen. Those words, like a red-hot brand, were seared deep into his soul. Pei Yulu, Shaolin. He murmured their names, each syllable steeped in bone-deep venom. The game has begun. He picked up a lighter, and flicked it on with a click. A ghostly blue flame leaped up, reflecting off his cold, emotionless profile. Then, he took his phone and aimed the screen at the flame. The digital report burned silently in the firelight, twisting and finally turning into a void of darkness. As he watched the last flicker of light on the screen die out, the corners of Kwang Che's mouth slowly curled upwards. It was not a smile. It was the bared fangs of a demon as the gates of hell swung open. Sunlight fell upon him, yet it could not dispel the abyssal chill that emanated from him. He stood there, like a newly forged blade of vengeance, sharp and gleaming, waiting to drink deep of his enemy's blood. Pei Yulu felt like she was going insane. From the moment Kwang Che had slammed the door and left, her world had completely collapsed. An immense fear, like cold vines, coiled tightly around her heart, squeezing until she could barely breathe. Xiao Lin, holding Ran Ran who had cried himself to sleep, paced anxiously in the living room, incessantly cursing Kwang Che's brutality and unreasonableness. What right does he have? Who the hell does he think he is? Xiao Lin hissed, his eyes sinister. Yulu, don't be afraid. Ran Ran is my son. That's a fact. No matter how ruthless Kwang Che is, he can't turn the world upside down. Can he? Worst case, we go to court. You think I, Xiao Lin, am afraid of him? Pei Yulu curled up on the sofa, hugging her knees tightly, her body trembling uncontrollably. Xiao Lin's tough words brought her no comfort, instead deepening her panic. She knew Kwang Che, or at least she thought she did. The man appeared calm and reserved on the surface, but deep down, he possessed a terrifying obsession and ruthlessness. The icy look in his eyes as he left, his declaration to get a paternity test, all hung over her head like the Grim Reaper's scythe. He's going to kill us. Pei Yulu's voice trembled violently, tears streaming down her face. Xiao Lin, you don't know him. The way he looked just now, it was terrifying. Shut up. Xiao Lin roared impatiently. What's the use of crying? The most important thing now is to stay calm. So what if he goes for test? No one can make a final judgment before the results are out. You insist that Ran Ran is his. Do you hear me? Pei Yulu shook her head in despair. The all-knowing look in Kwang Che's eyes before he left made it impossible for her to even deceive herself. The night was spent in extreme fear and torment. Ran Ran woke up crying from nightmares several times, and Pei Yulu, emotionally and physically drained, soothed him. Xiao Lin, with a grim face, was constantly on the phone, seemingly arranging something. The next morning, Xiao Lin had to leave for an important meeting. Before he left, he repeatedly warned Pei Yulu to keep her mouth shut and wait for him to come back and handle things. In the enormous villa, only Pei Yulu and the bewildered, uneasy Ran Ran were left. Time became incredibly long. Every minute, every second was a slow, agonizing torture. Pei Yulu was restless. She kept dialing Kwang Che's mobile phone, only to be met with the cold, mechanical voice announcing it was turned off. She tried calling Kwang Che's assistant, Lin Wei, who politely and distantly stated that Mr. Kwang was busy and couldn't take her call. Panic, like a snowball, grew larger and larger. She needed money. She needed to take Ran Ran and leave this godforsaken place immediately. She rushed to the study, opened the computer, and fumbled to log in her online banking. Your account has been frozen. Please contact the issuing bank. The bright red notification box was like a bucket of ice water poured over her head. Pei Yulu's heart sank. Unwilling to give up, she logged into another banking app. Abnormal account status. Transactions restricted. She tried a credit card payment platform. Sorry, this card cannot be used. She even remembered the card she had secretly opened with her mother's ID, where she had saved hundreds of thousands in personal funds over the years. Her hands trembled as she entered the card number and password. Account does not exist or has been closed. No. Pei Yulu let out a piercing scream and violently swept the laptop to the floor. The screen shattered with a harsh crack. Ran Ran, terrified, burst into loud sobs. It was over. It was all over. Kwang Che had made his move. He had frozen all her money. He was trying to push her to her death. A colossal wave of despair instantly engulfed her. She collapsed onto the floor, holding her weeping son, and began to cry her heart out. Without money, she couldn't move a single step. How would she support Ran? How would she fight against Kwang Che? Just then, the doorbell rang. The sharp chime was exceptionally jarring in the deathly silent villa. Like a startled bird, Pei Yulu shot her head up, staring at the front door in terror. Who was it? Had Kwang Che returned? Or the police? Trembling, she clutched Ran and shuffled step by step to the door, peeking through the peephole. Standing outside were not Kwang Che, nor the police. It was two men in black suits with stern expressions. One of them held a thick manila envelope. Miss Pei Yulu? The lead man's voice was flat and devoid of emotion. We are from Apex Law Firm. We have been retained by Mr. Kwang Che to serve you with a notice of divorce proceedings and related legal documents. Please sign to acknowledge receipt. Divorce proceedings? Pei Yulu's vision went black. She nearly fainted. She yanked the door open, her voice shrill. No, I won't sign. I want to see Kwang Che. Tell him to come see me. I'm sorry, Miss Pei. The lawyer, expressionless, held the envelope out to her. Mr. Kwang has authorized us to handle this matter in its entirety. According to the petition, Mr. Kwang is suing for divorce on the grounds of your significant marital fault, committing adultery and giving birth to an illegitimate child, and is demanding that you be cast out with nothing. At the same time, he is seeking repayment for all child support, education fees, medical expenses, insurance premiums, and other costs he has paid for Kwang Ran since his birth, totaling 3,758,642 yuan and 73 cents. This is the detailed list. The lawyer pulled a long, densely printed list from the envelope. It itemized every single expense for Ran from birth until the present, precise down to the brand of formula, the number of diapers, the fee for a single early education class. It even included photocopies of receipts for every toy Kwang Che had ever bought for Ran. Cast out with nothing. Seeking repayment of over 3 million. These cold words struck Pei Yulu's nerves like heavy hammers. She looked at the hopelessly long list, at the evidence of Kwang Che's love for his son that she had once enjoyed with a clear conscience, even flaunted. Now, it had all turned into sharp blades stabbing at her heart. No, this is impossible. He's Ran's father. How could it? Pei Yulu screamed hysterically, reaching out to tear the list to shreds. The lawyer nimbly stepped back, avoiding her hand, his voice as cold as ever. Miss Pei, please calm down. This is merely the litigation request. Furthermore, we have already applied to the court for asset preservation. The freezing of the assets under your name is only the first step. At the same time, we are formally notifying you on behalf of Mr. Kwang that, based on your severe marital infidelity, Mr. Kwang demands that you vacate this marital residence in Bishwawan immediately. This is a copy of the property deed, which clearly shows that the property is Mr. Kwang Che's personal premarital asset. The lawyer handed over another piece of paper. Premarital property, vacate. Pei Yulu's final fortress was shattered. She looked at the cold property deed, then at Ran in her arms, whose little face was red from crying, and then at the two lawyers by the door, as cold as robots. A colossal wave of despair and rage completely overwhelmed her sanity. Get out. Get the hell out. Like a madwoman, she grabbed a heavy glass vase from the shoe cabinet in the entryway and hurled it fiercely at the lawyers. Bang crash. The vase smashed against the doorframe and shattered, sending sharp shards of glass flying everywhere. A sharp piece slashed across Pei Yulu's bare calf, instantly opening a long, bloody gash from which fresh blood gushed. A sharp pain shot through her, but Pei Yulu seemed unable to feel it. She looked at the glass fragments scattered all over the floor, at her own bleeding leg, at Ran who was so scared he had forgotten to cry, and was just staring with wide, terrified eyes, and finally at the two lawyers who had merely frowned, their expressions still impassive. She let out a piercing shriek that barely sounded human, and she completely broke down. Unable to support herself any longer, she clutched Ran and fell to her knees with a thud on the cold floor, right onto the sharp, blood-stained shards of glass. A sharp, stabbing pain came from her knees and shins, but she was oblivious, just wailing in despair, her voice hoarse and broken. The money? Where's my money? Kwang Che, give me back my money. You devil, give me my money back. How am I supposed to live without money? What about Ran Ran? Come out. Come out. Blood trickled down her calf, staining the white tiles and the crystalline shards of glass, which refracted a bizarre and ghastly light in the bleak morning sun. Terrified by her mother's frantic state and the blood everywhere, Ran Ran burst into loud sobs, his small body struggling desperately in Pei Yulu's arms. The two lawyers watched the frenzied, bloody scene with indifference. The lead lawyer spoke softly into his earpiece. Target has lost emotional control, is self-harming. Glass shards and blood are on site. The child is frightened. Over. Then, as if they had just completed the most ordinary of tasks, they gently placed the divorce petition notice and the thick inventory list on a small, clean patch of the entryway floor, untouched by the glass. Documents served. Please take care of yourself, Ms. Pei. The lawyer spoke in a formulaic tone, then turned and left, pulling the heavy door, which shut out all hope, closed behind them. No, don't go. Give me back my money. Give it back. Pei Yulu struggled to get up and chase after them, but the glass shards embedded themselves deeper into the wounds on her knees and legs. The intense pain made her collapse again, and she could only beat her hands futilely against the cold floor, letting out desperate sobs. Inside the villa, all that remained were the woman's piercing cries, the child's terrified weeping, and the wreckage of shattered glass and glaring blood. Hell had arrived, and this was only the beginning. It was already 3 in the afternoon when Xiao Lin finished the long and tedious meeting. As soon as he turned his phone on, a flood of missed calls from Pei Yulu and a series of incoherent, despair-filled voice messages poured in. Xiao Lin, it's over. It's all over. Quang Che froze all my money. I don't have a single cent. The lawyers came. He wants to divorce me, to make me leave with nothing. And he wants me to pay him over 3 million. 3 million. He's kicking us out. This house is his premarital property. Xiao Lin, what do I do? What about Ran Ran? I'm hurt. There's so much blood. Xiao Lin, come quickly. Come quickly. Listening to Pei Yulu's broken sobs and the sound of Ran Ran's terrified crying in the background, Xiao Lin's face turned thunderous. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel. Quang Che, you're fucking asking for it. He floored the accelerator and sped towards the Bishwawan villa. Along the way, his mind raced, calculating a counter-strategy. Quang Che had acted faster and more ruthlessly than he'd anticipated. Freezing assets, filing for divorce, kicking her out. This was a move to push Pei Yulu completely into a corner. But he, Xiao Lin, was not to be trifled with. Trying to touch his woman and his son? It wouldn't be that easy. Just as the car entered the villa complex, his phone rang again. It was his wife, Su Wan. Xiao Lin frowned and rejected the call outright. He was in no mood to deal with Su Wan right now. However, Su Wan's calls were unusually persistent, coming one after another, relentlessly. Xiao Lin was annoyed by the noise and was about to turn off his phone when a multimedia message from Su Wan suddenly popped up. He subconsciously clicked on it. A high-definition photo instantly filled the screen. The background of the photo was, shockingly, the living room of the Bayside Villa yesterday afternoon. In the photo, he, Xiao Lin, was lowering his head, affectionately kissing Pei Yulu on the lips. Pei Yulu's eyes were closed, her cheeks flushed, and one hand was resting lightly on his chest. And beside them, Ran Ran was looking up with her small face, watching them happily. The angle of the shot was extremely tricky, capturing the expressions and actions of the 3 people, and even the warm atmosphere in the living room, with perfect clarity. This was definitely not something a candid shot could achieve. It was a surveillance camera, Quang Che surveillance camera, at home. Xiao Lin's mind buzzed, and all the blood in his body seemed to rush to his head in an instant, only to freeze into ice the next second. Quang Che, before he could digest this thunderbolt from a clear sky, Su Wan's phone call came in frantically again, the ringtone as sharp as a death knell. Xiao Lin's palm was instantly soaked in cold sweat, and a huge chill shot up from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. With trembling fingers, he pressed the answer button. On the other end of the line, there was none of the expected crying and questioning, only a dead silence, a suffocating, pre-storm dead silence. Su Wan. Xiao Lin's voice was dry and tight, with a tremor he himself didn't even notice. Xiao Lin, Su Wan's voice sounded terrifyingly calm, like the last trace of false tranquility before a storm. Where are you? I'm at the company, just finished a meeting. Xiao Lin lied subconsciously, his heart pounding wildly. Is that so? Su Wan's voice suddenly rose, carrying a hysterical sharpness and a bone-deep hatred. The scenery at the Bayside Villa District is nice, isn't it? How'd it feel to kiss that bitch? Huh? Su Wan, listen to my explanation. It's not what you think. Xiao Lin panicked, speaking incoherently. It was a misunderstanding. It was Quang Che who deliberately. Shut up. Xiao Lin. Su Wan's roar almost shattered his eardrum. You animal. Bastard. I bore you children and managed this family for over 10 years. And you're keeping a mistress outside. And even have an illegitimate child. 5 years. For 5 whole years. You've been playing me for a fool. No. Su Wan. You get your ass back here. Immediately. Right now. Get back here. Su Wan's voice completely lost control, filled with a madness that could destroy everything. Otherwise, I'll ruin your reputation. I'll make your name, Xiao Lin, stink throughout the entire business circle. The phone was hung up fiercely, leaving only a rapid, busy tone. Xiao Lin held the phone, his body ice-cold, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. It's over. Su Wan knows. With Su Wan's fiery and unyielding personality, and her family's deep-rooted network of connections in the local area, he dared not imagine the consequences. He abruptly turned the steering wheel, no longer caring about going to Bayside, and the car shot off toward his own home like an arrow leaving the bow. He had to stabilize Su Wan at all costs. However, he was still a step too late. As his car had just turned into the gate of the high-end residential area where his villa was located, he saw from a distance a large crowd of people gathered at his doorstep, pointing and chattering. At the center of the crowd was, shockingly, his wife Su Wan. Su Wan had clearly dressed up meticulously. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were red and swollen, but her face wore a nearly crazed, destructive expression. In her hand, she was even holding a phone stand, and the phone screen clipped on it was facing the main gate of Xiao Lin's house. She was live streaming. Xiao Lin's mind went boom and became a complete blank. He slammed on the brakes, pushed open the car door, and rushed over. Su Wan, what are you doing? Stop it. Xiao Lin roared, wanting to rush over and snatch Su Wan's phone. But it was already too late. The moment Su Wan saw him, a monstrous hatred erupted in her eyes. Like a completely enraged lioness, she let out a piercing scream. Xiao Lin, you animal. You finally dared to come back. She abruptly pointed the phone camera at the rushing Xiao Lin, crying and screaming at the screen. Family. Look, it's this animal. Xiao Lin, the vice president of XX Company, a beast in human clothing. He's been keeping a mistress outside for 5 years. The child is already 5 years old. He lied to me. He lied to our whole family. He played us mother and son for fools. The number of viewers in the live stream exploded in an instant with Su Wan's tearful accusations and Xiao Lin's appearance. The bullet screen scrolled frantically. Holy shit. It's really Xiao Lin. I know him. He looks so decent. The original wife is so pitiful. Beat the mistress. Support the original wife. Scumbag, go to hell. Requesting address. Let's dox him. Xiao Lin was completely stunned by the sudden, naked exposure. His face was deathly pale as he rushed forward, trying to cover the camera lens. Su Wan, are you insane? Turn it off. Insane? Yes, I am insane. You drove me insane. Su Wan jerked away from his hand, a crazed fire burning in her eyes. She raised her hand and, with all her strength, slapped Xiao Lin viciously across the face. Crack! The crisp, loud sound of the slap echoed clearly through the phone's microphone to the entire live stream. The slap was incredibly forceful. Caught off guard, Xiao Lin staggered, and half of his face instantly swelled up, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. He clutched his face, shocked and enraged, but more than anything, filled with incredulous humiliation. Su Wan, you! I'll kill you, you shameless beast. Su Wan gave him no chance to speak. More than a decade of pent-up resentment and the shame of utter betrayal erupted like a volcano at that moment. She screamed and lunged at him, her long nails like sharp claws, frantically scratching at his face and neck. This is for finding a mistress. This is for raising a bastard. This is for lying to me. You animal. You son of a bitch. Shaolin dodged pathetically. His expensive suit was torn, and in an instant, several bloody scratches appeared on his face and neck. The surrounding crowd gasped. Some held up their phones to record, others pointed and whispered. The comments in the live stream went completely wild, the screen filled with messages like, "Serves him right," "Scumbag had it coming," and "Go original wife." "Stop. Su-won, listen to me." Shaolin tried to grab Su-won's wildly flailing arms, but a woman in a towering rage possesses astonishing strength. "Say what? Say how you were kissing that bitch named Pei in someone else's living room? Say how you coaxed that bastard child into calling you daddy?" Su-won cried and cursed as she attacked him even more ferociously. "Shaolin, I'm telling you, this isn't over. I will ruin you completely. I'll drag you and that bitch to hell with me. Everyone, this is the address. Building XX, XX Community. Remember this scumbag, Shaolin. And the mistress is named Pei Yulu. She lives at number XX, Clearwater Bay. Everyone, help me expose them. Let them die a miserable death." Su-won screamed herself hoarse at the phone's camera. Listening to Su-won shout out his and Pei Yulu's addresses, hearing the murmurs of the crowd and the clicks of phone cameras, hearing the tsunami of condemnation in the live stream. A wave of icy despair instantly engulfed him. It was over. Completely over. His career, his reputation, everything he had built for half his life, was utterly destroyed in Su-won's insane live stream and this public brawl. He suddenly shoved with all his might, violently pushing away the berserk Su-won. He no longer cared about his image. Pathetically covering his face, amidst the crowd's jeers, contempt, and the chase of phone cameras, he stumbled back to his car like a beaten dog, slammed on the accelerator, and fled the community. As the car emerged into traffic, Shaolin's hands on the steering wheel were still shaking violently. The cuts on his face and neck burned with pain, but what hurt more was the shame of being stripped bare in public and trampled into the mud. His phone was vibrating incessantly. Without looking, he knew it was calls from his company, business partners, friends, maybe even the media. He didn't dare to answer. He had no idea where to go. Clearwater Bay. Su-won had already exposed the address. It must be a hornet's nest by now. The office? How could he face his subordinates and shareholders looking like this? The immense frustration and rage nearly tore him apart. Kwang Che. It must have been Kwang Che. He was the one who gave the surveillance footage to Su-won. He was the one who orchestrated this whole drama to ruin him. Kwang Che. Fuck you and your ancestors. Shaolin slammed his fist onto the steering wheel, letting out a beast-like roar. Just as his rage peaked with nowhere to go, his phone rang again. This time, it was an unfamiliar local number. Shaolin answered irritably, his tone harsh. "Who is it?" "Mr. Shao, it's me, Lao Wu." A somewhat familiar voice came from the other end. It was a mid-level manager in charge of procurement, one of Shaolin's confidants. "Lao Wu? What is it?" Shaolin suppressed his anger. "Mr. Shao, something's happened." Lao Wu's voice was filled with palpable panic. Just now, people from the Tax Bureau and the Economic Crime Investigation Department suddenly showed up. They've seized all the customs declarations, contracts, and financial records for last month's shipment of imported precision instruments. The captain leading the team specifically asked to investigate the deals you handled personally. He said someone filed a formal report accusing our company of issuing fraudulent VAT invoices to illegally obtain export tax rebates. The amount is exceptionally large. What? Shaolin felt a chill shoot up from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head, and his vision suddenly went black. Falsifying invoices? Tax fraud? Those few deals. He had indeed handled them, and they did involve some under-the-table operations, but it had always been done with the utmost secrecy. Who's the informant? Shaolin's voice was strained. "I don't know. It was an anonymous tip, but the evidence seems to be very solid. They got straight to the point as soon as they arrived. They even found the backup contracts we hid on the encrypted drive. President Shao, this is clearly aimed at you. And they came prepared." Old Wu's voice was on the verge of tears. "Anonymous tip. solid evidence. Came prepared. These words were like heavy hammers, pounding mercilessly on Xiaolin's heart. Quang Che. Who else could it be but him? Freezing Pei Yulu's assets, filing for divorce, exposing his scandal in public, and now, precisely pinning the felony of economic crimes on him. One step linked to the next, every move fatal. This was intended to completely destroy him. President Xiao? President Xiao, say something. What should we do now? Old Wu's anxious voice came through. Xiao Lin gripped his phone, listening to the dial tone from the receiver. It seemed Old Wu's call had been forcibly disconnected, and watched the cold, unfamiliar streetscape rushing backward outside the car window. An unprecedented, bone-chilling cold completely enveloped him. He was finished. Quang Che's revenge had only just begun, and it had already pushed him into an abyss from which there was no return. And ahead, all that awaited him was an even darker, colder despair. Like a cornered beast, Xiao Lin fled frantically through the city's jungle of steel and concrete. The scratches on his face and neck burned with a fiery pain, but more painful was the humiliation of being stripped bare and trampled into the mud in public, as well as the heavy hammer of economic crime charges hanging over his head, ready to fall at any moment. He didn't dare go home. Su Wan's madness and the aftermath of the live stream were enough to tear him to shreds. He didn't dare go to the company. The people from the Tax Bureau and the Economic Crime Investigation Department were likely waiting for him to walk right into their trap. Bisui Bay. That was the eye of the storm, Pei Yulu's purgatory. Going there would only be asking for humiliation, and he might even be devoured alive by the staking media or the furious, righteous netizens. He could only drive like a ghost to a deserted logistics warehouse district on the edge of the city. The place was vast and deathly quiet, with only the sound of the howling wind and the barking of stray dogs in the distance. He turned off the engine and locked himself in the dark car, licking his wounds like an injured beast. His phone screen lit up again and again in the darkness, only to be extinguished by him each time. Frantic, cursing texts from Su Wan, harshly worded inquiry calls from company executives, cold notifications from business partners severing ties, and countless calls and texts from unknown numbers. He didn't need to look to know they were from the Crusaders of Justice incited by Su Wan's livestream, subjecting him to a trial by internet with the most vicious language. With trembling fingers, he opened the livestream platform that had led to his ruin and disgrace. Although Su Wan's livestream channel had been banned, related screen recordings and screenshots had already spread like a virus. On the trending topics list, hashtags like hashtag Shaolin Cheats, hashtag Shaolin Beaten Bawai Fin Street, and hashtag Shaolin Bastard Child were shocking to the eye, firmly occupying the top spots. He clicked on a screen recording with the highest number of views. In the video, he was a complete mess, being slapped hard by Su Wan, scratched frantically, fleeing in panic amidst the laughter of the crowd and the lenses of their phones. The bullet comments and the comment section were an ocean of filth. Scumbag. Trash. Scum of society. Support the original wife. Beat this faithless husband to death. VP of XX company? Heh, let's get him fired tomorrow. That Mistress Pei Yulu is no good either. Bisui Bay no. XX, right? Sisters, let's team up and go greet her. Heard the scumbag is also suspected of economic crimes? The Tax Bureau is at his door? Serves him right. Let him rot in jail. How does someone like him deserve to live? I suggest physical castration. Every word was like a poison-dipped needle, stabbing fiercely into Xiao Lin's eyes and piercing through what little self-respect he had left. The decency, status, and connections he had cultivated for half his life had been utterly crushed to dust in just a few short hours by Quang Che, using a piece of surveillance footage and Su Wan's madness. He was now a rat crossing the street, with everyone wanting to beat him. Xiao Lin let out a low roar, suppressed to its absolute limit like that of a dying beast, and slammed his fist hard on the steering wheel. Blood oozed from the wounds on his knuckles, but he felt no pain, only an endless, cold despair. Just then his phone rang again. It was a number he could not ignore. The company's largest shareholder and his biggest backer, Director Wang. Xiao Lin took a deep breath, forcing down the metallic taste in his throat, and answered the phone in the steadiest voice he could manage. Chairman Wang. Xiao Lin. Chairman Wang's low roar, suppressing a towering rage, came from the other end of the line, his voice so cold it held no trace of warmth. What the hell have you been doing out there? Huh? Beating a mistress on a live broadcast? Getting your face scratched up by your wife on the street? Now, the whole city is laughing at our company. Laughing at me. Chairman Wang, please let me explain. It was a misunderstanding. It was Kwang Che who... Misunderstanding? Chairman Wang cut him off brutally, his voice suddenly soaring. The Tax Bureau and the Economic Crime Investigation Unit are in my office right now, holding a thick stack of report materials, falsifying VAT invoices, tax fraud, a huge amount. The entire chain of evidence is fucking complete. Shaolin, you got some nerve, using the company's shell to launder your own dirty money, and you even let someone get dirt on you and report it to the higher-ups? If you want to die, don't drag the entire company down with you. Shaolin's heart plummeted into an icy abyss. It was over. Not even Chairman Wang could protect him now. Kwang Che's move was too ruthless, too absolute. It struck him right at his weakest point. Chairman Wang, you have to believe me. I was framed. It was Kwang Che. I don't care who framed you. Chairman Wang's voice carried a devastating finality. Now, immediately, right this instant, get your ass back to the company. Explain everything clearly to the comrades from the Economic Crime Unit. Spit out all your dirty accounts and rotten affairs, every last detail. Strive for lenient treatment. That's the only thing you can do. Chairman Wang, you can't. Can't what? Chairman Wang's roar nearly shattered the phone. Shaolin, let me tell you, the board of directors has already held an emergency meeting and unanimously decided, effective immediately, to relieve you of your position as vice general manager and all other duties. You're fired. Do you understand? Fired. You are no longer an employee of this company. Your personal illegal and criminal activities have nothing to do with the company. The company reserves the right to seek compensation from you for all losses. Beep, beep, beep. The call was hung up fiercely, leaving only a cold dial tone. Fired. Seek compensation. Shaolin gripped his phone, feeling as if all the strength had been drained from his body in an instant. He slumped in the driver's seat, his eyes staring blankly at the filthy fabric of the car's ceiling. The last shred of luck, the final glimmer of hope, was utterly shattered by that phone call. His career? Ruined. His reputation? In tatters. His family? Suwon probably wanted to tear him limb from limb. His mistress? Pei Yulu couldn't even save herself, and she came with a bastard time bomb that could go off at any moment. His money? Kwang Che had probably targeted his illicit assets long ago, ready to be frozen and seized at any time. He now had nothing. No, he still had a mountain of inescapable debt and impending prison time. Kwang Che. Kwang Che. Shaolin muttered the name, his teeth grinding, his eyes erupting with bone-deep hatred and madness. You want me to die? Not that easy. If I die, I'm taking you with me. A crazy and vicious idea, like a venomous snake, slithered into his mind. He shot upright, his eyes gleaming with the fierce light of a final, desperate gamble. With trembling fingers, he dialed Pei Yulu's number. It rang for a long time before it was answered, and Pei Yulu's weak, terrified, tear-filled voice came through. Shaolin? Where? Where are you? There are so many people outside. They're pounding on the door, yelling horrible things. I'm scared. Yulu. Shaolin's voice was strangely and seductively urgent. Listen to me. Kwang Che has forced us into a dead end. There's only one way out. A way that can save us and save Ranran. What way? Pei Yulu sounded as if she were grasping at her last straw. Accused Kwang Che of domestic violence, sexual abuse, mental control. Shaolin's voice was extremely low, yet it carried a chilling viciousness. You have injuries on your body, right? From when the lawyer came yesterday. You knelt on broken glass and cut yourself. That's the evidence. And Ranran, does Ranran have any old injuries? Even a bruise from an accidental bump will do. You stick to the story that Kwang Che hit him, that he's been abusing you and your son for a long time. You had an affair because you couldn't stand his violence. You were forced into it. Ranran calls him daddy because he was threatened and intimidated by him. If you do this, public opinion will turn to our side. Kwang Che will become a universally condemned monster. He won't dare to exterminate us. We might even be able to turn the tables and make him pay us for emotional distress. On the other end of the line, Pei Yulu fell silent. Only her heavy, terrified breathing could be heard. Yulu, did you hear me? Xiao Lin grew anxious, his voice laced with a threat. This is the only chance. Do you want to be homeless on the streets with Ranran? Want to watch everyone point at him and call him a bastard? Want to see me in jail, and then have Quang Che slowly destroy you and your son? Do as I say. Now, immediately. Find the media. Post on Weibo. Post on Douyin. Take pictures of the wounds. Describe quando que has a monstruos, pardonable pervert. Hurry up. But, Pei Yulu's voice trembled violently. Ranran. He isn't hurt. The glass was my own. If there are no injuries, then create some. Xiao Lin completely dropped his disguise, his voice as hideous as a demon's. Pinch his arm a few times with your fingernails. Pinch hard, until it bruises. Or push him off the bed. Let him take a fall, as long as it doesn't kill him. Quick, there's no time. For Ranran, for our future, you have to do this. From the other end of the line came the sound of Pei Yulu sucking in a sharp breath, followed by Ranran's frightened cries. Xiao Lin, you're insane. Pei Yulu's voice was filled with incredulous terror. I am insane. Driven insane by Quan Ke. Xiao Lin roared. Pei Yulu, I'm telling you, if you don't do as I say, once I'm in jail, you and that bastard can just wait for Quang Che to play you to death. You know better than I do how ruthless he is. Think about yourself kneeling on broken glass. Think about the way he looks at you. Do you think he'll let you go? On the other end, Ranran's crying grew louder, filled with helplessness and fear. Pei Yulu fell silent. A long, deathly silence. Xiao Lin's words, like the most venomous curse, completely crushed her last shred of conscience and maternal instinct. Quang Che's icy gaze, the lawyer's ruthless list of demands, the frantic pounding and cursing at the door, and the even more terrifying future of Quang Che's revenge that Xiao Lin had painted. An immense fear, like a cold tide, completely submerged her. To survive, for Ranran. A faint, twisted voice echoed in the depths of her heart. All right, Pei Yulu's voice was as faint as a drifting thread, carrying a numbness of complete depravity. I'll do as you say. A twisted, cruel arc formed at the corner of Xiao Lin's mouth. Quang Che, you think you've won? Let's see who's more ruthless. He hung up the phone, a mad glint in his eyes. He immediately dialed several familiar Water Army leaders and marketing accounts who specialized in fabricating online hot topics and manipulating public opinion, barking out instructions in a hoarse voice, promising them hefty sums. A great net woven from lies, slander, and human evil quietly spread open in the abyss of despair, lunging with a mutually destructive madness toward the man standing on the high ground of revenge, Quang Che. Xiao Lin's vicious plan, like a spark thrown into boiling oil, instantly detonated the already seething public opinion. Just as the buzz from the video of Xiao Lin being beaten by Su Wan in the street had slightly subsided, a Weibo account named Desperate Mother Pei Yulu emerged out of nowhere, publishing a long, tear-soaked post accompanied by several shocking photos. The long post accused, I am Pei Yulu, a pitiful woman imprisoned and abused by my demonic husband, Quang Che, for 7 years. On the surface, he is a glamorous and successful entrepreneur, but behind closed doors, he is a psychologically twisted pervert. He has subjected me to long-term domestic violence, sexual abuse, and psychological control. If I disobey in the slightest, he beats and kicks me, humiliating me with the most vicious words. My body is covered in injuries. Old wounds have not healed before new ones are added. Attached photo, a gruesome, blurry shot of the gash on Pei Yulu's leg from the glass, as well as several old, faint bruises of unknown origin on her arm. What is even more outrageous is that he doesn't even spare his own son, Ranran. Attached photo, a picture of Ranran's arm with several clearly fresh, purplish-red pinch marks, with messy bedsheets in the background. The child is only 5 years old. Just for crying, he was ruthlessly pinched like this. If I try to stop him, I am met with even more frenzied beatings. I had an affair. Yes, I admit it. I made a mistake any woman in the world could make. but I was forced. In that hellish home, Xiao Lin's appearance was my only warmth and salvation. He gave me the courage to live. Ran calls him daddy because the child yearns for a father's love. That demon Quang Che is not fit to be a father. He only knows how to threaten his child with violence. Now, because his deeds have been exposed, this demon is flying into a rage out of humiliation. He has frozen my life-saving money. He beat me into this state, displays leg injury again. And he wants to kick us, a helpless mother and son, out of our home. He's even framing Xiao Lin for economic crimes. Where's the justice? Where's the fairness? I beg you all, please, save me and my child. Expose this beast in human clothing. Let him face the judgment of the law. This accusatory post, riddled with holes yet incredibly inflammatory, accompanied by several photos of injuries of dubious authenticity, was furiously pushed by the paid commenters and marketing accounts prearranged by Xiao Lin. In an instant, it ignited a new round of nuclear explosion on the internet. Hashtag Quang Che domestic abuse. Hashtag Quang Che child abuse. Hashtag beast in human flesh Quang Che, and other hashtags shot to the top of the trending list with the speed of a rocket. Public opinion reversed in an instant. Oh my God. So the scumbag is Quang Che. He beats his wife and child. Animal. I knew it. There had to be a reason why the original wife was so crazy. Support Pei Yilu. He laid a hand on his own child. This kind of scum deserves to go to hell. Death by 1,000 cuts. Support Mother Pei in defending her rights. The law must severely punish Quang Che. Dox him. Expose his company. Bankrupt him. At Jiangqing Public Security Uncle Officer. Hurry and arrest him. Countless furious netizens flooded the official website and social media accounts of Quang Che's company, wildly hurling insults and reporting him. Some even began to organize offline, planning to go to Quang Che's company and residence to enact justice for heaven. Quang Che's personal information, home addresses, including a property at Bishui Bay and several other secret properties, were also dug up by enthusiastic netizens and spread wantonly across the internet. At Dingfeng Law Firm, in Lawyer Zhang's office, Lin Wei looked at the overwhelming tide of curses online and the photos of the injuries of dubious authenticity, trembling with anger. Mr. Quang, this is slander. Blatant slander. The injury on Pei Yilu's leg was clearly from when she smashed a vase and cut herself, and the pinch marks on Ran's arm. Those are definitely new. It's too vicious. We should immediately issue a cease and desist letter. Sue them for defamation. Quang Che sat behind the large desk, his back to the city skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Silhouetted against the light, his figure was somewhat indistinct, with only the cigarette between his fingers, a single scarlet point, glowing and fading. On the computer screen in front of him, a high-definition, silent home surveillance video was playing. The footage clearly showed what happened after the lawyer left yesterday. How Pei Yilu had wailed hysterically in the empty living room. How she had kneeled on the glass shards to cut her own leg. And how, amidst Ran's terrified cries, she had ruthlessly, with her own fingernails, pinched several glaring, purplish-red bruises onto the sleeping child's tender arm. The entire process was cruel and clear. A cease and desist letter? A lawsuit? Quang Che slowly blew out a smoke ring, his voice calm, without a ripple, even carrying a strange, playful tone. No, that's too slow, and it would be letting them off too easily. He extinguished the cigarette, and turned around. The daylight from the window fell on his face. In his deep eyes, there was no anger, no grievance, only a cold, calculating precision, like a finely tuned instrument, and a hint of almost cruel anticipation. Lin Wei, he began, his voice not loud, but carrying an unquestionable force. 3 things. First, take the complete surveillance footage from the living room after the lawyer left yesterday. Process the key clips, especially of Pei Yilu's self-harming and pinching Ran, in high definition and at a timestamp. Contact all mainstream media, major web portals, and the most influential righteous social media influencers. Send it to them anonymously. Remember, anonymously. Second, get the blue folder labeled Ran's medical records from the safe in my study. Inside are all of Ranran's physical exam reports, vaccination records, and the original emergency room medical records for 3 accidental bumps. Once falling from the crib, once scraped on a slide at kindergarten, and once falling after being startled by a neighbor's dog, from Jiangsheng Central Hospital, from birth until now. Every single document has the hospital's official seal and the doctor's signature. They clearly record the time, cause, and extent of each injury, all minor surface wounds. Most importantly, the Guardian signature line is, in every single case, Pei Yulu's own signature. Not once is it Kwang Che's. Scan them, and also send them anonymously to the media and influencers. Third, Kwang Che's lips slowly curled into an extremely cold arc. Notify the property management at Bishui Bay to lift the entry ban on Pei Yulu, and accidentally leak a piece of information to a few of the most radical righteous netizens who have been staking out the villa complex. Tomorrow is Kwang Rant's 5th birthday. His good mother, Pei Yulu, might be at home to throw him an unforgettable birthday party. As Lin Wei listened to these commands, one by one, a chill involuntarily ran up her spine. She looked at Kwang Che's calm, waveless face and for the first time understood so clearly what it meant to not only kill the person but to attack the heart. This wasn't just a counterattack. This was dragging Pei Yulu and Xiao Lin, along with the web of lies they had woven, into the sunlight to be publicly executed in the cruelest way possible. Especially the last part. Lin Wei could almost imagine the devastating storm that would erupt when the incited, furious crowd rushed into the birthday party and saw what was about to happen. Yes, Mr. Kwang. I'll get on it right away. Suppressing her shock, Lin Wei immediately turned to carry out his orders. Kwang Che turned back to the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the bustling city remained a noisy torrent of traffic. The monstrous waves on the internet seemed to have no effect on its operations. He picked up his phone and opened the photo album. Inside was a picture he had asked Lin Wei to arrange a few days ago, a massive, meticulously crafted vinyl banner. The background of the banner was a warm cartoon pattern with a line of bold text printed on it. Happy 5th birthday to little Kwang Ran. And at the very bottom, in a smaller font, from Dad Kwang Che, I'll love you forever. Looking at the banner, an almost twisted sense of delight finally surged in Kwang Che's eyes. Love you forever, my good son. He made a phone call, his voice calm. Is everything ready? Banyan Bay, the birthday party tomorrow. Deliver it on time. A confirmation came from the other end. Kwang Che hung up and placed his phone gently on the table. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a glass of strong liquor. The amber liquid swirled in the glass, reflecting a cold light. He raised his glass to the false prosperity of the world outside the window, to the surging, diluted anger of the online world, and to the man and woman who were about to plunge into a true hell. He made a silent, toasting gesture. Happy birthday, my Ran. The Banyan Bay Villa, once a symbol of warmth and affluence, was now filled with a strange, intense atmosphere. Despite the unabated online uproar condemning Kwang Che for domestic violence and child abuse, and despite the sporadic righteous individuals still staking out the villa with their phones, Pei Yulu was determined to celebrate Ranran's 5th birthday. It was her last comfort and her chance to display her motherly love and innocence to Kwang Che and the outside world. Xiao Lin had disappeared. His phone was unreachable. His messages vanished without a trace, as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth. The immense fear and helplessness brought her to the brink of collapse. Only by looking at Ranran's innocent little face could she barely hold on. With the last sum of money Xiao Lin had transferred to her before he vanished. It wasn't much, clearly a hasty act. She bought a small cake and a few of Ranran's favorite snacks and toys. The villa was a mess, and she had no heart to clean it. She just swept the broken glass in the center of the living room into a rough pile, covered it with an old bedsheet pulled from the bedroom, and designated it the venue for the birthday party. Ranran seemed to sense the unusual atmosphere in the house. He had lost his usual liveliness and just clung tightly to his mother, his small hand clutching a slightly worn die-cast car model that Kwang Che had bought him long ago. Be a good boy, Ranran. It's your birthday. You should be happy. Pei Yulu forced a smile and pushed the small cake, with 5 colorful candles on it, in front of Ranran. Come on, Make a wish and blow out the candles. Ran looked timidly at the flickering flames, then at his mother's pale and haggard face. He asked in a small voice, "Mommy, where's Daddy? Is Daddy Kwong coming back for my birthday?" Pei Yulu's heart felt as if it had been brutally pierced by a needle. She suddenly hugged Ran, her voice choked with sobs. "My sweet Ran. From now on, it's just going to be Mommy." She didn't dare mention Shaolin. That name was now, for her, also filled with terror and resentment. In that bleak moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Pei Yulu's whole body trembled with fright, and Ran shrank into her arms in terror. Was it the netizens who had found them? Or Kwang Che? The doorbell rang again, persistent. Mustering her courage, Pei Yulu held Ran and walked trembling to the door. She peered through the peephole. Standing outside wasn't a mob of vicious netizens, nor was it Kwang Che. It was a delivery man in the uniform of a well-known bakery, smiling warmly. In his hands, he held an enormous, incredibly luxurious, and exquisite three-tiered fondant cake. On top of the cake, a chocolate plaque read, "Happy 5th birthday to Ran." Next to the delivery man stood two people in teddy bear costumes. One held a large bouquet of colorful helium balloons, and the other carried a gorgeously wrapped, limited edition remote-controlled race car gift box that was almost half a person tall. "Ms. Pei Yulu," the delivery man called out loudly. "This is the birthday cake and gift ordered by Mr. Kwang Che for little Kwang Ran. Please sign for it." Kwang Che. Pei Yulu's mind buzzed and went completely blank. What was he trying to do? An olive branch? Or a more terrifying trap? She hesitated, not daring to open the door. "Miss Pei, could you please open the door? The cake needs to be refrigerated, and it's more meaningful if the little one signs for the gift himself." The delivery person's voice came through the door, tinged with professional enthusiasm. Ran also saw the huge cake and the cute teddy bear outside. His childish nature was piqued, and forgetting his fear for a moment, he pleaded in a small voice, "Mommy, cake, bear." Seeing the pitiful longing in her son's eyes, Pei Yulu's heart softened, and she harbored a sliver of wishful thinking. Maybe Kwang Che had a change of heart. After all, he had once loved Ran so much. With a trembling hand, she opened the door. The huge cake and gift were brought in, instantly occupying the shabby old sheet in the center of the living room. Two adorably clumsy mascot bears also walked in, wiggling their bodies awkwardly and waving at Ran, emitting a cute electronic voice. "Happy birthday, little one." Ran was captivated, temporarily forgetting his fear, and watched with curiosity. The delivery person put the items down and handed over the delivery receipt. Pei Yulu signed it, her mind in turmoil. Just as the delivery person and the mascot bears finished their task and turned to leave, something unexpected happened. The heavy, carved main door of the villa was suddenly thrown open from the outside with great force. The force was so great that the door slammed against the wall with a loud bang. Blinding sunlight instantly flooded in, illuminating the lavish cake, the shabby decor, and the terrified faces of Pei Yulu and Ran. At the doorway stood, imposingly, Kwang Che. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his posture ramrod straight, like a judge who had just ascended. His face was devoid of any expression, only a cold indifference. His gaze, like two sharp blades quenched in ice, slowly swept over everything in the living room before finally settling on Pei Yulu's deathly pale face. And behind Kwang Che, there were 7 or 8 men and women holding phones and cameras, their faces filled with excitement and a sense of justice. They were the most aggressive of the internet justice warriors who had been squatting outside the villa complex. They had clearly been led in intentionally and were now excitedly pointing their cameras inside. Kwang Che. Pei Yulu looked as if she had seen a ghost, her voice changing pitch. She instinctively pulled Ran tightly behind her. What are you trying to do? Who are these people? Get them out." When Ran saw Kwang Che, a flicker of confusion crossed his small face, followed by immense fear. He remembered how terrifying his father, Kwang Che, had looked that night and burst into tears, desperately hiding behind his mother. "Mommy, scared. Daddy is scary." Kwang Che paid no heed to Pei Yulu's screams or Ranran's cries. He strode into the living room, his long legs moving with steady, powerful steps. His leather shoes made distinct tap sounds on the floor, each step feeling like it was treading on Pei Yulu's frayed nerves. He walked straight to the huge, three-tiered cake. Next to the cake stood a rolled-up, scroll-like object tied with a ribbon, which had been delivered with the cake. Pei Yulu hadn't had a chance to look at it yet. Kwang Che reached out his long, slender fingers and slowly, deliberately, untied the ribbon on the scroll. Swoosh! The scroll unfurled. It wasn't a painting. It was a huge, high-definition printout of a DNA paternity test report. At the very bottom of the report, the conclusion in bold black letters read frowny face, based on the DNA genetic marker profiling results. Sample 1, Kwang Che, is not supported as the biological father of Sample 2, Kwang Ran. It was presented before everyone, as clear and cruel as a red-hot branding iron. Pei Yulu let out a piercing shriek, like a cornered animal being strangled. She lunged forward like a madwoman, trying to tear the poster apart. No, it's fake. That's fake. Kwang Che, you forged it. You're framing me. Kwang Che simply raised a hand, effortlessly parrying her frantic attack. His movement was elegant and cold, as if brushing away an unsightly speck of dust. Without even glancing at the devastated Pei Yulu, his gaze turned to the righteous netizens, who were standing dumbfounded by this sudden, shocking reversal, their phones still raised. A cold, cruel smile slowly formed on his lips. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly through the dead-silent living room. And through the lenses of the live-streaming phones, it spread across the entire internet. To all you concerned netizens, thank you for attending my son's birthday party. He deliberately emphasized the word sons, his tone dripping with infinite sarcasm. As it happens, this is a good opportunity to clarify some recent rumors and to announce some good news. Kwang Che's gaze, like a cold searchlight, slowly swept across the stunned faces, finally landing on the enormous paternity test poster. Me, a domestic abuser? A child abuser? He sneered, his voice thick with disdain. I, Kwang Che, have always taken responsibility for my actions. But the utter humiliation of raising another man's bastard for 5 years isn't enough to make me lay a hand on an innocent child. His gaze pointedly swept over the faint, bluish pinch marks on Ranran's arm. As for the injuries on my ex-wife, Ms. Pei Yulu, Kwang Che paused, pulled a USB drive from his inner suit pocket, and casually tossed it to the nearest man holding a live-streaming phone, his face a mask of shock. On here is the complete surveillance footage of this living room from yesterday afternoon, after the lawyer left. If any of you are interested, you can see just how she got her injuries, and also which loving mother is responsible for the abuse marks on my son's arm. The man fumbled to catch the USB drive, and someone beside him immediately handed over a portable card reader. A few seconds later, a silent, high-definition video from the surveillance footage played, clearly presented to all viewers through the live stream's lens. In the footage, Pei Yulu was wailing hysterically, kneeling on shards of glass of her own accord, and the cruel scene of her viciously pinching the sleeping Ranran's arm. The live chat instantly exploded. Comments flipped from support Mama Pei and down with the scumbag Kwang Che to WDF. A plot twist? This woman injured herself and pinched her child. That's vicious. Have we been used? My God, she made those marks on his arm. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. And Kwang Che seems kind of pitiful. The few righteous netizens at the scene were completely dumbfounded, looking at the frantically scrolling comments on their screens, then at the giant paternity test poster, and then at Pei Yulu's ferocious actions in the footage, their faces burned with the anger and shame of being fooled. Finally, Kwang Che's voice rang out again, like a judge's gavel falling in the dead silence. He raised his hand, pointing to Ranran, who was hiding behind Pei Yulu, so terrified by the scene he had forgotten how to cry, his eyes just wide with fear. His voice was not loud, yet it carried a soul-piercing coldness and cruelty that reached every ear in the room and, through the live stream, every corner of the internet. As for this child, the cruel curve of Kwang Che's lips deepened. He stared at Pei Yulu's instantly ashen face and enunciated, word by word, as if delivering a verdict. Bastard. Boom! That one word exploded in Pei Yulu's mind like a bomb. Her vision went black, her body swayed violently, and a gasping sound, like air from a broken bellows, escaped her throat, but she couldn't speak a single word. Extreme terror, shame, and despair gripped her throat like a giant, icy hand. Bastard. The word, like the most vicious of curses, was branded onto Ranran's innocent soul through countless live-stream lenses. Though he didn't fully understand the word's meaning, he could feel the overwhelming disdain, disgust, and pity in the gazes coming from all directions. An immense sense of fear and injustice washed over him, and with a wah, he burst into a heart-wrenching howl. No! Pei Yulu finally broke free from the utter suffocation, letting out a scream so shrill it was barely human. Like a completely crazed animal, she threw herself at Quang Che, her long nails clawing for his face. Quang Che, I'll kill you. You've ruined me. You've ruined Ranran. You devil. You monster. Quang Che merely turned to the side, easily dodging her clumsy attack. He watched dispassionately as her own momentum sent her stumbling, falling hard onto the cold floor right next to the giant paternity test poster, her son's verdict. I'm not the one who destroyed you. Quang Che looked down on her, his voice as cold as ancient ice. It was your own greed, your shamelessness, and your lies. He spared no further glance for the broken, wailing Pei Yulu or the stunned Ranran on the floor. His gaze shifted to the phone-wielding netizens, who stood completely at a loss, and to the live chat on their screens, where the tide had turned into a frenzy of discussion. Is the show over? Quang Che's voice was tinged with faint mockery. The door is over there. I won't see you out. Having said that, he paid no more attention to anyone. He straightened the cuffs of his suit, which were not wrinkled in the slightest, and with long strides, calmly and cruelly, he stepped over the wreckage in the living room, over Pei Yulu's desperate wails, over Ranran's heart-wrenching terror. Like a grim reaper who had just completed a perfect performance, under the focus of countless cameras, he walked out of this tomb once called home without looking back. The sunlight fell on his straight back, yet could not dispel the dense, hellish chill that emanated from him. In the living room, all that remained was the completely broken Pei Yulu, the terrified and helpless Ranran, the luxurious cake, the giant bastard poster, and those few messengers of justice who looked at each other with burning faces. The scroll of hell, at this moment, was completely unfurled with no way back. Quang Che walked out of the gate of the Clearwater Bay Villa. Behind him, in that magnificent cage, Pei Yulu's broken sobs and Ranran's heart-wrenching screams were like background noise, coldly isolated from his consciousness. He got into the black car parked by the road. The driver, Old Chun, glanced cautiously at his boss's expressionless face in the rearview mirror and asked in a low voice, Mr. Quang, back to the company or to the riverside? Quang Che uttered 2 words, his voice calm and unwavering, as if he were not the one who had just experienced that soul-stirring trial. The car drove smoothly away from this place of right and wrong. Quang Che leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. In his mind, however, he clearly replayed Pei Yulu's final appearance, completely broken, like a rag doll with its soul sucked out, and Ranran's eyes, filled with immense fear and bewildered pain. A very subtle, almost imperceptible ripple spread in the depths of his cold heart. Was it pity? No. Was it pleasure? It didn't seem to be entirely that either. It was a strange sense of calm after a huge emptiness. It was as if the poison that had been accumulating for too long had finally been completely gouged out in the cruelest way. Although it left a bloody and ugly wound, at least it was no longer festering. He took out his phone. The screen was still on the interface of a certain live broadcast room. The bullet comments had completely reversed, filled with curses against Pei Yulu, condemnation of Shaolin, sighs for Quang Che's encounter, and complex discussions about the child who had been publicly branded as a bastard. This woman is too terrible. She self-harmed to frame someone and even pinch the child. A heart of a snake and scorpion. Shaolin is no good either. The scumbag and the bitch are locked together. Mr. Quang is so miserable, raising someone else's son for 5 years, only to be bitten back. What about that child? So pitiful to have such a mother. Bastard. This word is too hurtful. The child is innocent. Innocent? He enjoyed the comfortable life provided by Mr. Kwong for 5 years. The beautiful dream his mother wove for him with lies. Now that the dream is shattered, he should also bear the consequences. If you want to blame someone, blame his cheap mother. Kwang Che turned off the live broadcast with a blank expression. The child is innocent, perhaps. But this innocence was precisely the deepest and most poisonous shackle that Pei Yulu and Xiao Lin had placed on him. The innocence he had nurtured with sincerity and wealth for 5 years had ultimately turned into the sharpest dagger stabbing into his heart. He could not afford this innocence, nor did he want to bear it any longer. The phone vibrated. It was a call from Lin Wei. Mr. Kwong. Lin Wei's voice carried a hint of imperceptible nervousness and excitement. Xiao Lin was intercepted by the police at the entrance of the West City Expressway. He tried to flee to the neighboring province by car, but was stopped by a joint effort of the Economic Investigation and Traffic Police, who had already set up a control. He was caught red-handed. A large amount of cash and several forged passports were also found in his car. He has now been formally criminally detained. News also came from Director Wang's side. The board of directors has unanimously passed a resolution to fully cooperate with the police investigation and formally sue Xiao Lin to recover all losses caused to the company by his personal criminal acts. This time, he will definitely not be able to turn things around. Kwang Che merely responded faintly, as if what he had heard was just an insignificant piece of news. Xiao Lin's end was already within his expectations. A serious economic crime, coupled with the Su Wan family kicking him when he was down and director Wang cutting ties, what awaited Xiao Lin would be a long life behind bars. His reputation ruined, left with nothing. This was more painful than killing him. Also, Lin Wei continued her report, her tone tinged with a cold pleasure. As per your instructions, Dingfeng Law Firm has already submitted the application for a medical opinion on compulsory treatment for a person with no capacity for civil conduct and related evidence to the court. The grounds are Ms. Pei Yulu's severe mental instability and her acts of self-harm and harm to a minor, referring to the pinching of Ran. The evidence includes yesterday's surveillance footage, the forensic report on Ran's injuries, and public online speculation about her mental state. The court has just made its ruling. Lin Wei paused, then enunciated each cold word clearly. The application is granted. It is decided that Pei Yulu will be subjected to compulsory medical treatment, to be executed immediately. Compulsory medical treatment. A psychiatric hospital. A distinct arc finally, slowly, began to form at the corners of Kwang Che's mouth. It wasn't a smile, but more like the sated and cold mark of a man who had finally tasted the ultimate flavor of revenge. Understood. He hung up the phone. The car was parked at a secluded scenic viewpoint by the river. The sun was setting, its golden afterglow scattering across the sparkling river surface, a sight of breathtaking beauty. Kwang Che pushed the car door open and stepped out. The river wind, carrying moisture and a chill, rushed to meet him, rustling the short hair on his forehead. He walked to the railing and gazed down at the ceaselessly flowing water. His phone vibrated again. This time, it was an encrypted message with a photo attached. The background of the photo was the private psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of Jiangcheng, known for its strict management and tight security, Anning Sanatorium. Inside the cold, iron gates, 2 burly male nurses in white coats were flanking a woman, gripping her tightly. Her hair was disheveled. She wore a patient's gown, and she was struggling and screaming wildly. Even through the photo, even with the woman's face mostly obscured by her messy hair, Kwang Che could clearly recognize her. It was Pei Yulu. Her eyes were vacant and frantic, filled with ultimate terror and despair. Her mouth was wide open, as if letting out a silent, heart-wrenching scream. Her former charm, her former gentleness and grace were long gone. All that remained was a thoroughly destroyed, crazed soul. Beneath the photo, there was only a single line of cold text. Target has been admitted. Level 1 care. Over. Level 1 care. It meant 24-hour close surveillance, restricted movement, and forced medication. It meant she would completely lose her freedom, lose her dignity as a person, and, in a place filled with genuinely insane people, taste the bitter fruit of her own sowing day after day. Without end, Quang Che stared at the photo silently for a long, long time. The golden light of the sunset fell on his face, half bright, half swallowed by shadow, outlining a profile as hard and cold as chiseled stone. The river wind gusted, whipping at the hem of his clothes. Finally, he raised his hand and, with a pat of his thumb, slowly and forcefully wiped it across the corner of his mouth. There, where Pei Yulu's frantic nails had scratched him during her last lunge the day before, a small cut had formed a thin scab. A faint stinging sensation came from his fingertip, mixed with the rough texture of the scab. Quang Che's tongue, slowly, with a near-ceremonial reverence, licked the tiny wound. A very faint taste of his own blood, metallic and coppery, spread in his mouth. Cold, slightly salty, with the scent of rust. It was this insignificant taste of blood that, like a key, instantly unlocked the floodgates in his heart that had been suppressed for far, far too long. An indescribable, surging, almost destructive pleasure, like a volcano dormant for 10,000 years suddenly erupting, instantly swept through his entire body. It was an ultimate experience that transcended anger, transcended pain, transcended all normal human emotions. Ecstasy. Fucking ecstasy. Watching Pei Yulu get dragged into the psychiatric hospital like a mad dog, watching the last glimmer of light in her eyes be completely extinguished, watching her rot and stink in that living hell, watching Xiao Lin get handcuffed like a stray dog, watching his life's work turn to nothing, watching him waste away the rest of his life in a cold prison, watching all the deception, betrayal, and humiliation that pair of animals had inflicted upon him be crushed, trampled, and completely liquidated by his own hands, bit by bit, with interest. This feeling, it burned more than the strongest liquor. It was more satisfying than the most climactic sex. It was more thrilling than earning hundreds of millions. This was the sweet rain of vengeance, the ambrosia of victory, the unparalleled, ultimate pleasure of mastering fate and stomping one's enemies deep into hell. A low, satisfied sigh escaped from deep within Quang Che's throat. He tilted his head back slightly, closed his eyes, and let the overwhelming ecstasy wash over every corner of his soul. The small cut on the corner of his lip, in the afterglow of the setting sun, was like a victory medal, gleaming with an eerie and cold luster. Licking the blood from the corner of his mouth, he tasted his enemy's despair. This taste, fucking exhilarating. The river wind still blew, the river water still flowed. The sun sank below the horizon, withdrawing its last golden ray. Boundless dusk began to envelop the land. Quang Che slowly opened his eyes. In those deep eyes, the surging madness and ecstasy receded like a tide, finally settling into a bottomless, cold calm. It was as if the earth-shattering storm of revenge he had just experienced was merely a breeze brushing the water's surface, leaving no trace. He took one last look at the photo on his phone screen, the one of Pei Yulu being dragged into the psychiatric hospital. Then, with a light tap of his fingertip, chose to permanently delete it. Then, he turned his back to the heavy dusk that had swallowed his enemy, and walked towards the black sedan waiting quietly. His figure was tall and straight, his steps steady, like a monarch who had just concluded a perfect hunt, treading on the bones of his enemies as he walked towards his throne, now free of shadows. The car door closed. The engine let out a low rumble, carrying this Avenger returned from hell, and merged completely into the brilliant and cold lights of the city. The end. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. Thanks.